Um, so the Jews have the idea of Messiah, son of David, and Messiah, son of Joseph.
Yes.
And they say that the Jesus described in the Gospels does not fill the criteria of son of David, but in previous videos you said that Jesus does fulfill some criteria of son of Joseph because he died fighting against the forces of evil.
Yeah,
Now,
you're going from the Orthodox Jewish perspective because
okay,
the assumption is that the son of David will not come and die on the cross and be raised from the dead. That's their gratuitous assumption because if you read the Hebrew Bible, you do not find any explicit reference to Messiah, son of Joseph, Mashiach ben Yosef, if you want to sound intelligent Hebrew. That's an inference. They infer that.
okay,
There are references to the king from David's line, the anointed king who comes from David's line. So if you want to know where the notion of the messianic king, the Messiah, son of David, comes from, it comes from God's covenant with David. So
hmm,
all of you have some homework for this year. When you get a chance, read the entirety of Psalm 89. Just read it, entirety. You can read specifically Psalm 89, 19 to 37, where God swore irrevocably or irrevocably, however you want to pronounce the word, tomato, tomato, that this covenant that he made with David will never be altered, never be broken, never be changed. What covenant? That the kingship of God on earth belongs to David and his sons. God has given his earthly kingdom to David and his descendants. So if he has a descendant that doesn't walk in obedience to God, God will depose him, but replace him with another son of David. And he says he will not go back on his word and alter this covenant. It's irrevocable, it is unbreakable. So now, for centuries, the Jews realized there is no king of David. So did God break his promise? That's actually the complaint in Psalm 89. If you read from 38 down, the psalmist is reminding God, where's your promise to David? Here, we're living in exile. We've returned. There's no king. But you swore there'll be a descendant of David sitting on the throne. God, where's your promise? That's actually the context of Psalm 89, folks. The psalmist is complaining to God. You swore to David, but you've left us without a king from David. So this is where the Jews realize, since God cannot lie, he cannot fail, and God is real, and the scriptures are God's words, he will send this king of David, this anointed one. And that's where the idea of Mashiach ben David, Messiah, son of David, arose. Now, if you ask me, are there any statements of a Messiah, son of Joseph? Not explicitly. It's inferred. It's an inference. But even when you say it's inferred, an inference based on certain statements that you can read that someone will come from Joseph who will suffer like Joseph, but then will be exalted like Joseph was. But it's not explicit. So the rabbis, on the other hand, saw these references and concluded, so there will be a reigning Messiah, that's the Davidic Messiah, but then the Messiah who suffers like Joseph did, but then will be exalted like Joseph was, then he's the Messiah, son of Joseph, right? But there's nothing explicit. In other words, if you go to Zechariah 12:10, which the rabbis interpreted as referring to Messiah, in Zechariah 12:10, when it says, they shall look on me whom they pierced and mourn for him as one mourns for the death of an only son, right? They say, oh, that's Messiah, son of Joseph, who'll be killed in the war of Gog and Magog, whom David, the son of David, the Messiah, son of David, will resurrect. But it doesn't say Messiah, son of Joseph. In fact, it doesn't even say Messiah. It says, they shall look on me whom they're pierced. That's God speaking. The Jews will mourn over the fact that they pierced me, their God, through. Doesn't even say Messiah. The word Messiah is not there. Neither
hmm,
Messiah, son of Joseph, or Messiah, son of David. It's God whom they're going to physically thrust through, right, and pierce to death, or pierce at least, right?
okay.
That's what it says. But the rabbis read that as saying, oh, this one who will be pierced through, slain in battle, that's Messiah, son of Joseph. And Messiah, son of David, will resurrect him. Now, another name for Messiah, son of Joseph, is Ephraim. He's called Ephraim. Why? Because Ephraim is Joseph's son. In the Pesikta Rabbati, their Messiah, son of Joseph, called Ephraim, pre-exist. I did a session on this. There, we're told that the Messiah, son of Joseph, Ephraim, is there with God from the days of creation. He's been there with God. And God tells him, are you willing to bear the yoke of the sins of Israel so that they can be redeemed and they can be forgiven? And he accepts it. So there you have, in the Pasikta Rabati, which I quote in one of my articles, I did a session on it, the acknowledgement of the pre-existence of Messiah, son of Joseph. It's in a Jewish source. It's there. I quoted in my articles, and I did a session on it, right? And he's saying, I will take this yoke. And it even quotes Psalm 22 and applies it to Messiah, son of Joseph, suffering vicariously for the sins of Israel. Do you know that?
I didn't know that, but it's.
Yes.
I will look at your article. Yes.
In fact, if you go to my YouTube channel and you put in Pasikta Rabati, now there's various ways of spelling it. Here's two ways. It's right there. It'll come up. Pasikta Rabati. I did a session on this, guys. I don't know if you remember. That's why I keep telling you. Go back and watch my older sessions, but it's also spelled this way with a Q. Pasikta. Do both spellings, it comes up. Pasikta Rabati. Rabatai, if someone want to pronounce it that way. And it says Psalm 22 is about Messiah, son of Joseph, Messiah, who is Ephraim. Now, the point being, if you ask the rabbis, where do you find any explicit reference to two Messiahs? You don't. But you do find a suffering servant who will be exalted to reign. That's Isaiah 52, verses 13 to Isaiah 53:12. Well, in the book of Isaiah, this servant who suffers will be exalted, lifted on high. In other words, there'll be a throne. Elsewhere is identified as the root of Jesse, the one who sits on David's throne. So it's one Messiah who suffers and dies vicariously, but will be exalted to reign forever. But the very fact that they see evidence in the Old Testament of a Messiah who has to suffer and be killed and die for sins destroys the lie of Tovia Singer that there's nothing in the Hebrew Bible that speaks of a Messiah suffering and dying for the sins of people. They're lying through their teeth because Messiah, son of Joseph, shows the rabbis were aware and could see from specific verses in the Hebrew Bible, Messiah will be killed and cut off for sins.
So the second coming of Jesus in his glorified form, does that satisfy some of the qualities of Messiah David?
Well, he's the son of David on earth and when he returns. But when he comes in his glory physically to the earth to reign, then there'll be no doubt for the Jews he is the Messiah, son of David.
Okay, so Jesus satisfies both qualities of Messiah Joseph and David.
Yeah, from the rabbinic perspective, he's both. But from the Old Testament, there aren't two. I know on One for Israel, they brought this scholar who is showing evidences from the Hebrew Bible that referred to Joseph and the firstborn ox of Joseph and all. And he sees that as an indication there will be a Messiah from Joseph who will be killed but then exalted. I think that's reading too much into these passages. But be that as it may, he's just reflecting what the rabbi saw. But there's not, if I ask you, show me an explicit reference where God promises Joseph a messianic figure to come that will reign. You can't find it. It's inferred. But the very fact that they have to come up with two messiahs shows that there are passages that clearly speak of God's anointed one being killed. Zechariah 12:10. See, that's not ambiguous. That's, they shall look on me whom they pierced. They'll thrust me through. They have a problem with it, though. What's the problem? They can't have God being pierced, even though it's God speaking. They shall look to me whom they pierced. That's God speaking. So they can't have God being pierced. So they say, oh, no, that's the Messiah who will be cut off and killed. But then Messiah, son of David, will exalt him. And they saw it in Psalm 22. In Pasikta Rabati, the Jews who wrote Pasikta Rabati, that's not a Christian document, saw that Psalm 22 is about the vicarious sufferings of Messiah, Messiah being punished for the sins of others. So these passages are explicit. There is someone who will suffer vicariously, meaning suffer because of other sins, not for any sin he's committed, and does it willfully in order to save and atone for their sins. And they see that has to be Messiah.